Chapter 7:11. Do not spare even a single one. Hidden Dragon Sect is one of the 3 great sects in the Land of Immortals. It occupies a large territory in the Immortals galaxy. The sect has an incredibly deep history and possesses many cultivation planets. They are famous among the Immortals. The Hidden Dragon Sect within the Land of Berserkers is just a branch. However, even though it is only a branch, it has been able to occupy some of the areas with the densest amount of spiritual aura in Eastern Wastelands after years of administration, just like Sky Mist Dao. They occupy an area that is nearly 100,000 lees. It looks like a flat piece of land and there is nothing in it that would catch anyone's attention. Anyone could pass through that place as if they were passing through a deserted area. Even if they knew that this was the place where Hidden Dragon Sect was located, they could not see nor touch it. They would be unable to find even a single trace of a Hidden Dragon Sect disciple. No matter how they looked, they would only be able to see a normal piece of flat land. 400,000 something berserkers occupied the sky. The murderous aura spreading out from their bodies turned the sky dark and filled the land with a bitter and grim air. Su Ming's gaze landed on the ground. His expression was calm, and no one could see any hint of emotion on his face. Lord God of Berserkers, this is Hidden Dragon Sect. There was a person from Sky Mist Dao who had willingly changed his own blood inheritance standing beside Su Ming, and by his side was Old Man Ya from Berserker Fang tribe. Currently, the man from Sky Mist Dao was speaking carefully. It was a middle-aged man with a pale face. Not only was his voice quivering, his heart had been in fear all the way to this place. He had witnessed Sky Mist Dao's destruction and watched all his fellow sect members die. As for then, he could be said that his heart and soul were petrified in fear as he stood before the insurgent berserkers. It was especially so when Old Man Ya let out ghastly peals of laughter once he finished saying these words. His laughter made that Sky Mist Dao disciple's skin crawl. This lowly person has once come to Hidden Dragon Sect with the older generation in his sect before. This place wasn't like this before. I can still remember that there were many floating palaces, and the magnificent presence in the place was something that would be difficult to forget once a person witnessed it. The Sky Mist Dao disciple quickly said, his head lowered. Lord God of Berserkers, I've dealt with Hidden Dragon Sect more than others. This sect is skilled in hiding themselves. The words hidden and dragon in their name can already tell you what sort of skills they have. Also, Hidden Dragon Sect has a lot of resources. You could say that they are the richest sect among all the immortal sects in the Land of Berserkers. Man Ya licked his lips and cast a look at the plains beneath him as he spoke to Su Ming. Su Ming averted his gaze from the plains and stated languidly, "Once we destroy this sect, I will give its land to your tribe, Man Ya. Let your tribe prosper here." Once Old Man Ya heard these words, his eyes flashed with a brilliant light. As the strongest warrior in his tribe and a berserker who had attained great completion in the Berserker Soul Realm, he had always wanted to make his tribe members even stronger, and since Hidden Dragon Sect had chosen this place, it was naturally a place suitable for a tribe to live. He had been incredibly envious of Kai Lei Qian for being able to occupy Sky Mist Dao with his tribe earlier, though it was an envy without malicious intent. When he heard Su Ming's words, he licked his lips and immediately started laughing. His yellowish-black teeth that were revealed themselves when he laughed added a ferocious air to his face. Right behind Man Ya was Qianqi, Wu Shuang, and Xue Shuo. They looked as calm as usual, but their hearts were filled with expectation. They could already tell what Su Ming was thinking of. Once they destroyed all the immortal sects in Eastern Wastelands, the places where these sects were located would become the territory of the big tribes of Eastern Wastelands. Evil Spirit Sect will be given to Qianqi. Evil Lust Sect will go to Wu Shuang. As for Evil Immortal Sect, Xue Shuo, make your tribe prosper there. Su Ming turned his head around and cast a glance at the old berserkers who had already attained great completion in the Berserker Soul Realm and had even taken a small step towards life cultivation. There were even faint traces of life cultivation's presence coming from their bodies. Su Ming had already come to know these old men's names when they rushed from all directions to worship him. At the same time, based on what he had come to understand previously, he also knew that these people were the 5 strongest forces of power among the berserkers in Eastern Wastelands. Thank you, God of Berserkers. Qianqi's spirit was lifted, and he wrapped his fist in his palm before bowing towards Su Ming. Faint smiles appeared on Xianxia and Wu Shuang's faces as well. They bowed towards Su Ming. The berserkers may be staging an uprising, but this so-called rise in power could only be truly proved when all tribes became stronger. That was why this sort of reward was more practical than anything else to them. As for Great Leaf Immortal Sect, a freezing glare shone in Su Ming's eyes. Nan Gong Hen. When Su Ming spoke, a shadow immediately closed in and appeared in front of him. He was, naturally, the fated kin Nan Gong Hen. There was respect on his face, but he did not wrap his fist to greet Su Ming. Instead, he knelt down on one knee and greeted him with the fated kin salute. He was not paying his respects to the god of berserkers, but was paying his respects to Su Ming, his respected senior Mo. Even if Su Ming was not the god of berserkers, the fated kin would still follow him as zealously. Fated kin is the race born from me. From now on, they will be my descendants in the land of berserkers. Great Leaf Immortal Sect will be the spot where fated kin's branch will be located in Eastern Wastelands, Su Ming stated calmly as he cast a glance at Nan Gong Hen. As for Evil Dust Sect, during the course of the year he had been at Eastern Wastelands Tower, the sect had been dissolved and absorbed by the other evil sects due to the lack of a grand sect elder, hence it was naturally overlooked by Su Ming. There was no excitement on Nan Gong Hen's face. He only nodded and did not say any words of gratitude, because the respect and zeal on his face that surpassed that of the berserkers represented everything by itself. After all, he was not worshipping the god of berserkers. He only worshipped Su Ming. Su Ming's words attracted Xianxia and the others' attention. A thought bloomed in their hearts and they looked towards him together. It's natural that the race born from the god of berserkers would need to defend Eastern Wastelands, but Lord God of Berserkers, do you mean that? Xianxia blinked, and after a moment of hesitation, he asked something softly. South Morning has been shattered into several islands. All the islands in South Morning belong to fated kin. There are surely immortals and other races that have risen as well as their puppets in the alliance of the Western region and Northern Province. Once we've dealt with the immortals in Eastern Wastelands, are you willing to come with me to the other continents and form branches of your tribes there? Su Ming looked at Xianxia and the other two before he cast a glance at Man Yue, whose eyes had gained a slightly red tinge. These four people cast a glance at each other. Their breathing instantly quickened, and they bowed once again to Su Ming. This time they did not wrap their fists in their palms to bow to him. Instead, they knelt down on one knee, just like Nan Gong Hen had done. We are all willing to follow you to go on a campaign to the alliance of the Western region and sweep through Northern Province. We will destroy all the immortals and have them return us our mountains and rivers. We will do everything for the berserkers' rise to power. Su Ming did not speak. Instead, he looked at the horizon in the distance. That direction he was looking at was the west, and it was the direction where the alliance of the Western region was. My soul is in the land of berserkers, and the only thing I can do is to have all berserkers unite and make my people strong. Only by doing so can I bring the berserkers to rush out of Yin Death and enter the immortals' worlds, and watch the color of autumn spread in the land of immortals. Su Ming mumbled in a soft whisper that only he could hear. He was alone. He was incomplete. He was lonely and lost. His gaze would constantly flash with a light that was interlaced with confusion and awareness. He did not know where he was. He only knew that he needed the red of autumn to be able to move from winter to spring. I am almost no longer me, but I do not know what I am either. Su Ming sucked in a deep breath, and everything within his eyes was replaced by a cold chill. He cast a cold glance at the ground and lifted his foot to take a step downwards. At the instant he took that one step, the power at the pinnacle of the initial stage of life matrix erupted with a bang in his body. This power was the strongest force within the land of berserkers at the moment. It was the invincible pinnacle in this world. There was no longer any person within the land of berserkers at the moment that could surpass this level of cultivation. Even if there was, that person would be forcefully suppressed. Perhaps only a non-human would be able to surpass Su Ming's level of cultivation. However, among humans, Su Ming was invincible. When he took that one step, he swung his right arm towards the sky. At the instant he did so, a freezing air filled the world. That freezing air grew thicker with each passing moment before it swiftly turned into snow. An endless amount of snow started spreading outwards from Su Ming as it spun. In the blink of an eye, a circular area of 100,000 something lees turned into freezing winter. The endless amount of snow let out a chill that could freeze all things, as well as exuded a terrifying presence. Each flake of snow could erupt with a bitter and grim murderous air that would not be weaker than that of her in Berserker Soul Realm. This was Su Ming's powerful might once he reached the initial stage of Life Matrix and arrived at the pinnacle of that stage. His strength far surpassed those who had attained great completion in the Berserker Soul Realm, and he was the invincible pinnacle that even those who had attained great completion could not hope to compare to. The white flakes might look like snow, but in truth, they were not snow. They were Su Ming's life. They were his death's life. It was a unique divine ability that transformed all the aura of death in his body and erupted forth after fusing with his life matrix. This divine ability was different for everyone. Each person who moved into this realm would form different divine abilities as they gained different epiphanies due to all the different life matrices. Not a single one would be similar. This was the first time Su Ming let out all of his power within Life Matrix without holding back and made a flower of snow blossom in eastern wastelands. As he spread his power outwards and freezing wind moaned in the area, snow floated down. Xuexiao and the others sucked in a sharp breath and swiftly took a look at Su Ming. During that instant, they finally got to truly know Su Ming's might and the god of Berserker's majesty. During that instant, the scene of when Su Ming fought against the immortals in that shocking battle turned into an invisible seed that planted itself in their hearts. That seed was known as reverence. This reverence would follow them throughout their lives. Su Ming's gaze was calm when he looked at the snow around him. He pushed his right hand downwards lightly. At the instant he did so, all the snow within the circular area of 10,000 something lees fell still before charging towards the ground that Su Ming was pushing against through the air. In the span of a breath, a loud bang shook the sky and earth, tearing through the ground madly. The crash from the endless snow made it seem as if a picture scroll had been torn apart. Once the snow lifted amid all those ringing bangs, it was like an illusory cover had been ripped off the ground, revealing Hidden Dragon Sect, which had been concealed under an illusion. A large amount of luxurious halls floated between the sky and earth. There were also shocked Hidden Dragon Sect disciples standing within their halls with pale faces. Kill them all. Do not spare even a single one, Su Ming stated flatly. Chapter 712, Great Leaf Sword Rune. The sky turned a faint shade of red. That red was like the red hue of autumn, and when a person looked at it, they would find a desolate air surrounding the sky. Blood was thick on the ground. When it spread out, a bloody stench rose into the air, either exciting or making puke those who smelled it. This was not hell but more like the underworld. And the spring water flowing in the rivers of this underworld were blood. Hidden Dragon Sect was eliminated from the land of Berserkers. Besides 1,000 something people kneeling on the ground submissively while trembling, choosing to change their blood inheritance to live, all the other manner of living in the sect had died. They died miserably and did not put up too much of a resistance or struggle. No one who tried to fight back could survive the charge from a 400,000-man army, especially since this was going to be the place where Man Ya's tribe was going to live in the future. To prevent any unfortunate incidents from happening, he had his tribe seal the area so that no disciples of Hidden Dragon Sect could manage to run away. Su Ming did not participate in this battle. He stood silently in midair and watched the bloody fight playing out before his eyes. Shrill screams of pain reached his ears, and along with them came an endless amount of curses until those who shouted them were killed. When Su Ming saw and heard everything, the confusion and alertness in his eyes interlaced with each other. He stood in midair and did not move. Nan Gonghen protected Su Ming silently. The other fated kin were scattered around them as well. If anyone from Hidden Dragon Sect rushed towards them, they would immediately turn into icy snow that symbolized death and delivered it. People will eventually die. They will walk from life to death, moving from spring to winter. However, the color of autumn is still too dull, Su Ming mumbled softly. When night arrived and the moon hung high in the sky, overlooking the shattered towers, the aura of death from Hidden Dragon Sect surged into the sky. That aura of death spread out and filled the air. From then on, Hidden Dragon Sect no longer existed in that place. Instead, It had become the place where Man Ya's tribe would grow and prosper. A large amount of hidden dragon sex resources was dug up. Man Ya and the other four broke open the endless amount of seals in the place, and all the doors to the cave abodes were thrown open. The vast amount of resources was enough to quicken the breathing of anyone who saw it. There were large amounts of spirit stones, an infinite amount of medicinal cores, vast numbers of ancient scrolls, as well as huge quantities of materials required to create and refine enchanted vessels. All of these things represented just how rich Hidden Dragon Sect had been and how deep their power laid. Even if Sky Mist Dao had an equal amount of fame as Hidden Dragon Sect in the Immortals Galaxy, when the Berserkers destroyed the sect and searched through the place, the items they found there were only a third of what Hidden Dragon Sect possessed. Su Ming did not take too many of these items. He gave most of them away to the big tribes in Eastern Wastelands as a reward to serve as important resources for them to grow powerful. 7 days later, when Evil Spirit Sect was invaded by the Berserkers' army, they resisted for half a day before all the sect's runes were broken. Then, the entire sect became history in the land of Berserkers. Besides a select few and several hundreds of those who chose to submit to survive, all of the others in the sect died. Blood flowed down the mountain of Evil Spirit Sect. Shrill screams of pain and booming sounds continued reverberating in the area as the Berserkers waged war on them. Shandong did not die, and neither did the girl who Su Ming had controlled with his art using the doll in the past. They had instead been asked to leave politely, due to Su Ming's orders. Besides these people, everyone in Evil Spirit Sect was killed off, and the place became the new location of Xianxia's clan. After 5 more days, Evil Lust Sect chose to destroy their runes once the hundreds of thousands of Berserkers arrived. This sort of destruction brought forth a madness that spread 100,000 lees in the world. There might have been quite a few who were unwilling to do so in Evil Lust Sect, but in the end, they could not prevent this sort of death. In the mid of a bang that reverberated through the entire Eastern Wastelands, Evil Lust Sect and the place where it was built turned into dust. A large number of Berserkers also died because of this. The number of deaths they suffered surpassed the numbers they lost when they were in Sky Mist Dao. However, these deaths only served to stimulate the madness within the Berserkers' blood. With it, the Berserker army rushed towards Evil Immortal Sect. Once the rune to the entrance eventually crumbled and the Berserkers were about to kill all the people of Evil Immortal Sect, an incredibly dramatic event happened. Internal strife tore apart the people of Evil Immortal Sect. At the time the rune shattered, half of the people in the sect had already died due to that strife, and the remaining thousands knelt down and worshipped the incoming Berserkers. They were willing to change their blood inheritances and become slaves they had chosen submission. As of then, all the immortal sects were destroyed one by one in Eastern Wastelands. Only one remained, Great Leaf Immortal Sect. The sects that had been destroyed turned into the spots where the big tribes who had followed Su Ming in Eastern Wastelands would be located. These places belonged to Xianxia, Qianqi, and the others. There were also the matter of the half-berserker and half-immortal subordinates. These people had changed their blood inheritance to stay within the immortal sects. They had once been berserkers, but had now become oddities. For the first time, conflict rose among the big berserker tribes because they were in disagreement of how they should deal with these people. Some believed that they had a right to live. After all, many of these people were once members of their own tribes, and some of them were even their family. However, there were an even larger number of berserkers who despised them. They believed that these berserkers had betrayed them, and they had to use their blood to wash away the humiliation they had brought to their race. No consensus could be reached for this conflict, with many different voices and opinions. In the end, Su Ming made a decision regarding this matter. The berserkers who had betrayed their own kind were quite numerous. They had to receive punishment, and that punishment was that they had to be the vanguards in the army as they went to chase out the outsiders in the alliance of the Western region and Northern Province. Once they killed a sufficient amount of outsiders, they would use their battle achievements to earn the right to return to the berserkers. If they did not die, then they could still be a berserker and return to worship the god of berserkers. This decision was not completely accepted by all the berserkers who had changed their blood inheritance, and those who could not accept it became part of the autumn in the world. Under this brutal slaughter, besides one particular region in Eastern Wastelands, all other parts of the continent returned to the berserkers once again, and a gathering that would lead them across the Dead Sea towards the alliance of the Western region as well as Northern Province was held as the big tribes began their operations. Crossing the Dead Sea, especially in a scale where millions of people would go, was something that had never happened since the land of berserkers was split into 5 continents. This grand thing attracted the attention of all berserkers, exciting them. Besides Su Ming and a select few others, most of the berserkers could not travel through the Dead Sea just by flying alone. That was why they needed an endless amount of ships that could traverse the Dead Sea. As the entire eastern wastelands began preparations, Su Ming brought with him the fated kin to the spot of Great Leaf Immortal Sect. It was the only immortal sect remaining in eastern wastelands. Su Ming chose not to let any berserkers attack this place. He would go alone and destroy Great Leaf Immortal Sect. Because this sect was Di Tian's sect. Great Leaf Immortal Sect was a huge mountain that towered into the clouds. The mountain looked like a gigantic sword that stood erect on the ground. It was a terrifying sight to behold, for people were like ants compared to it. Perhaps Great Leaf Immortal Sect was not like this in the past. However, as of then, the sect before Su Ming's eyes was this mountain, a sword that wanted to charge into the sky. Waves of sword aura spread out and filled an area of 10,000 lees. All manner of life that stepped into this region would have to suffer the attacks from that sword aura. Respected Senior Mo, let us fated king go with you. Nan Gong Hen stood beside Su Ming. Right behind him were the hundreds of fated kin that had come with him. All of these people had zealousness on their faces as they looked at Su Ming and waited for his orders. Su Ming shook his head. He looked at the hundreds of fated kin, and a smile appeared on his face. He turned around and took a step towards that region. At the instant his foot landed, sword aura surged into the sky. Piercing whistling sounds echoed in the air, and hundreds of sword auras appeared out of nowhere, charging straight towards Su Ming. At the instant he took his third step, booming sounds reverberated in the air, and all the sword auras came at Su Ming. However, their arrival could not stop him in the slightest. When the sword auras were 100 feet from Su Ming, it was as if they had crashed into a barrier that made them unable to continue onward, and all of them shattered. A 9-colored screen of light manifested swiftly 100 feet away from Su Ming. That screen of light was spreading out from a square seal floating above Su Ming's head, and it was Su Ming's enchanted treasure, the 5-direction seal. Since his level of cultivation had increased and he had stayed in the Eastern Wastelands Tower for the duration of a year, he had had time to refine this 5-direction seal in his body. At this moment, he could already control this seal somewhat and even make it send out the 9-colored screen of light. The hundreds of fated kin watched their respected Senior Mo walking into the distance. As he walked further and further away, getting closer to Great Leaf Immortal Sect's mountain, the hundreds of sword auras coming towards him from all directions increased to thousands. Those thousands of sword auras covered the world and charged towards Su Ming with a bitter and grim air. However, none of them could pass through his 9-colored screen of light. When Su Ming activated that extreme speed of his and shot up like a long arc to fly towards the Great Leaf Immortal Sect's mountain, the thousands of sword auras erupted with a bang and turned into tens of thousands of sword auras that charged towards him from all directions. Right behind those tens of thousands of sword auras were another batch of them, just as large. It was as if those sword auras were limitless, and as booming sounds surged into the sky, Su Ming's body could no longer be seen clearly. He was hidden away by the limitless sword auras. At the moment he was less than 1,000 lees away from the mountain of Great Leaf Immortal Sect, and the entire region of Great Leaf Immortal Sect let out a deafening roar. 9 huge cracks suddenly tore through the ground under that boom, and 9 shocking waves of sword aura shot out from the cracks with a bang. The presence of those 9 waves of sword aura were incredibly strong, and they even gained the form of swords once they appeared. At the instant they took shape, they charged towards Su Ming. At the same time, nearly 100,000 sword auras appeared out of nowhere in the world and surrounded the 9 waves of sword aura that seemed to have gained physical form as they charged towards Su Ming. With a look of indifference, Su Ming lifted his right hand at the instant the sword aura closed in and seized the air. Then, the killing sword flashing with a golden light appeared in his hand. A fierce glare flashed in Su Ming's eyes once he held the sword in his hand. "Can a sword that is not held in a hand still be considered a sword?" he asked flatly, then thrust the killing sword forward. Chapter 7:13. The Sword in the Hand. The inheritance Su Ming obtained from Hong Luo regarding the use of swords was different from how the immortals used swords to fly. His method was even older and almost clumsy. It was not as agile as a flying sword, which was why Hong Luo had not delved deep into it after he had obtained it by pure chance. However, Su Ming was incredibly interested in this method to use swords. This ancient method adhered to using one's hand to hold onto a sword. Only when a sword was in a person's hand could it truly become a sharp tool for the sword wielder. With the killing sword shining with golden light, Su Ming's casually thrust forward, and the sword sliced through the air as it went forward, a large suction force swiftly erupting from within it. This was not the sword's power itself. Su Ming slightly conformed with some form of law in the world as he thrust forward and triggered some strange changes, which made the place where the sword passed through the center of the area. It then sent all forms of existences, even divine senses, tumbling forward into the sword's path. At that instant, the hundreds of thousands of sword auras distorted and changed their direction, charging towards the sword in Su Ming's hand. It was as if the sword's path had turned into a black hole that could devour everything. However, the 9 waves of sword aura that had gained form and now looked nearly physical after they flew out of the cracks in the ground only let out piercing sword whistles as they scattered slightly before transitioning from being mere illusions to something corporeal. They did not change their direction and charged at Su Ming, coming less than 100 feet away from him within an instant. The 9 swords closed in on him at the same time, spreading out waves of powerful pressure that made it seem as if they could destroy anything. Right after that one thrust, Su Ming loosened his grip around the killing sword with a calm expression. He did not hold the sword in a tight grip. Instead, at the instant the 9 swords closed in on him, he flicked his wrist, and with his wrist acting as the axle, he swung the killing sword from the left to the right, then from up to down, before he swung it around himself in a circle. If anyone looked over, they would see that as the sword in Su Ming's hand swerved around him, a circular slash formed by an endless amount of vertical sword illusions manifested due to his movements. It looked like a circular slash, but if that anyone looked again, they would find that it was a method to use swords that would form a sword formation. It looked as if it had formed a sword shield that stood before Su Ming to protect him. The 9 flying swords coming towards him instantly crashed into it. Sounds of swords clashing into each other rose into the air. Eventually, a resounding boom spread outwards, and the 9 swords that had gained physical form shattered and fell back, turning into smoke and scattering away. Su Ming stood his ground with a calm expression. The sword in his hand drew a beautiful arc that went diagonally from his left side to his feet. A freezing glint shone in his eyes, and a wave of murderous aura appeared in his gaze. That murderous aura and the motion of Su Ming swinging that sword diagonally from his left looked as if he was storing up power. It was like the calm before a storm, like the quiet before a volcano erupted, like an ancient ferocious beast that would spread out an extreme, aggressive air that surged into the sky the instant before it devoured the world. During that instant, all activities in the world showed signs of stopping, and an indescribable, oppressive air surrounded the area without any sound. The source of all of this was naturally Su Ming bringing his sword downwards. There are 13 styles to use swords, but I've only come to understand 4, flicking, thrusting, swirling, and slicing, but it's enough to break this rune. At the instant Su Ming said these words in a flat voice, the sword that was held diagonally to his lower left side was brought swiftly to his upper right side. A clear sword mark traveled from his lower left side to his upper right side as the world boomed. This was slicing. With the sword's sharpness, it would slice apart all barriers that blocked its path. At the instant Su Ming swung his sword, the world rumbled. The swing contained some change in the world's laws, and at the instant Su Ming sliced upwards, an excited sword whistle traveled out from the killing sword. There was a wave of agitation and excitement within that whistle. It was the sword's complete acknowledgement, because this method was the only correct way to allow a sword to erupt forth with a power that could shake the sky and earth. If it was a flying sword, then it would be impossible to execute this slicing technique, since no one was holding onto the sword. Besides thrusting and slashing, it would not have the intelligence to execute anything else. The killing sword had a spirit. It had been suppressed by Su Ming earlier and forced to submit to him, but clearly, there had been defiance within that submission, and the sword had been waiting to turn against Su Ming. Yet at that instant, as the sword whistle traveled forward, the spirit within the killing sword truly acknowledged Su Ming, because it had been able to sense that when Su Ming held it in his hand, the 3 actions of thrusting, swirling, and slicing had allowed it to burst forth with its complete power, and it was a power that surpassed what it possessed. This power made it tremble with excitement. This power made it feel as if it had gone through a cleansing, and a faint feeling of an epiphany blossomed within it. It was a sword, and this was how it should be like. The world roared. When Su Ming sliced through the air, a diagonal sword mark tore through the space before him. That tear traveled forward with a bang, and wherever it went, the world would be torn apart, the air would shatter, and as the crack grew larger, it swept through 1,000 lees before it landed on Great Leaf Immortal Sect's mountain. An even louder bang rang into the air, and the sword mark from that one slice shot through Great Leaf Immortal Sect. It shot through the sword-shaped mountain and charged towards the area behind it. As it continued spreading, it eventually turned into a crack in the world that was several tens of thousands of feet long. It went straight through the sword rune that surrounded Great Leaf Immortal Sect and created a large gap in it. Once that gap appeared, the sword rune that protected the mountain where Great Leaf Immortal Sect was located crumbled around it. The rune turned into an endless amount of sword fragments that fell backwards in all directions while stirring up a violent gust of wind that swept up to the 9 heavens. A violent boom that shook the entire area shot up into the air. The sword-shaped mountain that belonged to Great Leaf Immortal Sect shuddered, and its center started slanting as that booming sound rang in the air. When half of the mountain fell to the left and crashed down, the ground trembled, and a loud sound surged into the sky. Waves of dust rose up and spread through the area. Su Ming's hair and robes moved due to the wind, but his expression did not change. With the killing sword in hand, he looked over coldly. At that moment, half of Great Leaf Immortal Sect's mountain had been sliced off. The surface where it had been cut off was incredibly smooth, and that part was naturally where Su Ming's sword mark had passed through. The sword-shaped mountain was broken. The killing sword in Su Ming's hand was trembling and letting out excited cries. Murderous aura spread out from its tip, as if it was thirsting for blood and hoping to drink it for eternity. Swords are primary killing tools. Su Ming lifted his head and looked towards the broken Great Leaf Immortal Sect mountain before he walked over slowly. On this day, he would destroy a sect by himself and save his second senior brother from Great Leaf Immortal Sect. Fated kin were looking at their respected senior Mo excitedly from the back. The might of that sword just now had shook the sky and earth. It was enough to shake the hearts of all those who witnessed it. Su Ming's footsteps seemed slow, but in truth, with every step he took forward, his body would appear a little faded. When his form became clear again, he would already be 1,000 feet away. It was fine for those looking at him from the back, they would not be in too much discomfort because of what they saw, but if anyone looked at him while he was walking towards them, they would immediately feel dizzy. Because even though they would see Su Ming tens of thousands of feet away, in the blink of an eye, he would be much closer, making them think that their eyes were deceiving them. The surroundings did not move, but Su Ming's body would suddenly turn into an illusion, then gain clarity just as abruptly, instantly causing all immortals who were staring at him to feel dizzy. By the time they felt this dizziness, Su Ming was already standing at the foot of the remaining half of Great Leaf Immortal Sect's mountain. He lifted his head and looked at the broken sword-shaped mountain. Then he took a deep breath. As Su Ming breathed in, layers of snow fell down from the sky above Great Leaf Immortal Sect. Each flake exuded an endless amount of freezing air, and in the blink of an eye, everything within a circular area of 10,000 lees was covered in snow. That snow was very dense. When it landed on the ground, it looked like a gigantic seal from a distance that sealed Great Leaf Immortal Sect within. This was the art Su Ming created in Life Cultivation Realm, Midwinter's Chill. With this art, he could seal off all directions, preventing all immortals within Great Leaf Immortal Sect from escaping, turning this place into a cage. I have come here today to destroy Great Leaf Immortal Sect, Su Ming stated languidly. As his voice reverberated in the air, the echoes of his words seemed to be faintly passing through the endless snow around him. Once these sounds fused together, they turned into a roar that sounded as if it came from heaven itself, shaking the area so much that the remaining half of Great Leaf Immortal Sect's mountain was wrecked by tremors. At the time Su Ming said these words, he lifted his foot and walked forward, onto the stairs leading to Great Leaf Immortal Sect's mountain. At the instant his foot landed, an infinite amount of sword aura erupted from Great Leaf Immortal Sect with a bang, and 2,000 long arcs flew out. Within these 2,000 long arcs were 2,000 Great Leaf Immortal Sect disciples. All of their eyes were crimson red. As they charged forward, they rushed towards Su Ming along with the sword aura. As roars echoed in the air, even more Great Leaf Immortal Sect disciples flew out from behind the 2000 and charged towards Su Ming. The sword in Su Ming's hand whistled. It thirsted to have blood dye its blade red, and that thirst made the killing sword tremble violently. Its whistling seemed to be pleading for Su Ming to let it kill to its fill. Su Ming looked at the thousands of people coming towards him, and the chill in his eyes grew colder. He lifted his foot and took another step forward. As he moved, the stairs behind him instantly shattered and turned into ashes. No unnecessary words were said. When he took that one step forward, the thousands of Great Leaf Immortal Sect disciples closed on him. Su Ming swung the sword in his hand forward, and a head flew up swiftly, bringing with it a wave of fresh blood, dyeing the tip of the sword red. With a couple thrusts and one swing outwards, several heads more immediately flew up. Once their blood covered Su Ming and Immortal's vision, Su Ming took his third, fourth, and fifth steps. He walked calmly upwards. There was an endless number of Immortals by his side, along with waves of sword aura booming around him. He did not stop waving the sword in his hand. As the sword spirit let out excited and bloodthirsty whistles, heads fell on the ground and rolled down to the foot of the mountain. Chapter 714. The Two Prejudiced Extremities. Su Ming did not know how many people he killed. He had taken 300 steps. An endless wave of sword aura charged towards him with loud booming sounds, but as he brandished the killing sword in his hand, those waves of sword aura disintegrated. At the same time, more heads flew into the sky, with blood and shrill screams of pain. Su Ming's body was red. It was the color of blood. It was the blood of Great Leaf Immortal Sect's disciples. The killing sword in his hand was red. The entire Great Leaf Immortal Sect mountain had turned red. The 300 steps behind Su Ming had already shattered, as if they represented his will and determination. Wherever he went, all lives would shatter, just like the stones on the stairs. Blood flowed down the mountain. A thick bloody stench filled the area, and even the snow in all directions looked as if it was about to be dyed red. Su Ming walked forward calmly. As the tip of his sword sliced through the air, a teenager that did not seem to have even hit his 20s had his head separated from his body right before Su Ming. There was confusion and anguish in his eyes as he fell to the side. "There is no grudge between us, but you should not have been a part of Great Leaf Immortal Sect," Su Ming whispered softly, then seized the area beside him with his left hand. Immediately, a person who had transformed into a rainbow-colored phoenix with a divine ability right beside him was seized by the throat as Su Ming's left hand shot through her divine ability. She was a woman with a beautiful face, but there was not an ounce of pity within Su Ming for her plight. The chill in his left hand surged into her body, shattering her throat as she trembled in despair. A destructive power rushed into her body and disintegrated her nascent divinity. Su Ming let go and took a step forward. There was no right or wrong to this, neither was there good or evil. There were only different choices made under two different viewpoints. Great Leaf Immortal Sect was Di Qian's sect, and this determined Great Leaf Immortal Sect's fate. In Su Ming's mind, there was no such thing as searching for the instigator alone to solve a problem. It was his aloof attitude that made him destroy an entire sect when someone in it provoked him. His thoughts were extreme and biased. It was a merciless attitude towards his enemies. It did not matter whether it was Hidden Dragon Sect, Sky Mist Dao, or even Evil Sect. Su Ming had almost never attacked or contributed to the destruction of these sects. Most of it was done by the berserkers' crazed slaughter. The only time he did not bring them was now, when he came to Great Leaf Immortal Sect. Even fated kin had been ordered to wait outside for him. Because the hatred Su Ming harbored for Great Leaf Immortal Sect was so great that he would regret it if there was a single person that did not die in his hands. Due to his hate for one person, Su Ming grew to hate all those related to his opponent by blood and every single person in his sect. Perhaps this was not right, but in his memories, before he was sent to Yin Death Region, there was his little sister's voice in the endless darkness. He remembered the feeling of all the people surrounding him and his sister to devour and absorb the presence within their bodies. It made his little sister increasingly weaker and caused him to become prejudiced. "I helped berserkers because my soul is here, because my master and senior brothers are berserkers, because the beautiful moments in my memories are my most precious treasures, even if they are fake. In those memories there is a mountain. That mountain, the people there, the traditions, customs, and everything else belongs to berserkers. That is why I will help berserkers. Even if I don't admit to being the god of berserkers, I can help them make the berserkers rise in power. Nostalgia flashed in Su Ming's eyes. He swung the sword in his hand and took another few steps forward. There were already several thousands of heads behind him, but this battle had not ended. Because Su Ming treasured his memories and because the people in the 9th Summit were berserkers, he would contribute for the entire race. This was just how his character was. On the other side of this extreme personality was the reason for Su Ming's current massacre. Due to his hate for one person, he could hate his entire sect, and if he was going to kill, he would kill till not even a single blade of grass was left. All of you should not have entered Great Leaf Immortal Sect. Su Ming shook his head. He swept the blood-red sword in his hand sideways and with one move entered the top of the remaining half of Great Leaf Immortal Sect's mountain. The one swing from the blood-red killing sword caused several dozens of heads to fly into the air. Flesh blood filled the area and dyed all the snow in the air nearby. Su Ming. At the instant Su Ming stepped onto the top of the remaining half of the mountain, a furious roar traveled into the air before him. That voice belonged to Beiling. He held a sword in his hand. He was trembling and his eyes were bloodshot as he stared at Su Ming. There were complicated feelings as well as hate in his eyes. Xianxia was standing by his side quietly, and there was a vacant and dull look on her face. Beiling stared at Su Ming and shouted loudly, "Must you kill everyone? Must you destroy the entire Great Leaf Immortal Sect?" Su Ming lifted his foot and walked onto the final step under him to stand at the top of the remaining half of the mountain. At that moment, a crack appeared on the final step on the stars. However, it did not shatter. This was the first step that did not shatter completely after he walked past it. If your answer is yes, then kill me and my wife so that we won't have to be filled with grief and indignation for watching our fellow sect members die. Go on. I won't retaliate. Attack me. Beiling threw away the sword in his hand, and as he shouted, tears fell down from the corners of his eyes. Su Ming was silent. The killing sword in his hand was spreading out killing intent on its own. The spirit that was filled with a hint of bloodthirst was like a cold gaze that was looking at the duo before it. If Su Ming had not stopped moving, it would have definitely rushed in and killed these two people so that it would become more radiant with their blood. On this day, it had been dyed with an amount of blood that it had never had before. This excited it, and in the midst of its excitement, its acknowledgement towards Su Ming also reached its peak. You no longer care about the past nor about the things in Dark Mountain. So kill me. Kill Xianxia, who liked you when she was young. Kill us. You won't need much time to do it. Kill us and destroy our feelings for you so that we won't miss you anymore. Beiling roared loudly, and more tears fell from his eyes. Do you still remember me teaching you the bow? Do you still remember us fighting together when Dark Mountain Tribe was attacked by Black Mountain Tribe? Are you still the same person as you were back in Dark Mountain? Can you live up to our elders' expectations? Can you live up to the expectations of our people in Dark Mountain Tribe? Come on, kill me. Beiling's words brought a sharp stab of pain to Su Ming's heart in the midst of his silence. This pain was a poison that would be stronger the more precious one's memories were to them. It was an extreme pain that tore through Su Ming's heart. At the instant he felt that pain and slowly looked towards Beiling, Xianxia suddenly lifted her head by his side. The dull look in her eyes was replaced by a complicated expression. As tears fell from her eyes, she seemed to have made a decision, and she cried out anxiously to Su Ming, "Su Ming, go away." But before she finished speaking, Beiling turned around and slapped her. She fell to the ground, and blood trickled down the corners of her mouth. Almost at the moment Xianxia gave her warning, a sword suddenly came charging out like lightning from the air behind Su Ming. At the instant he was hurt by Beiling's words, it stabbed his heart. There was a dark ball of blue flame at the tip of the sword. It was a poisonous flame that could burn souls. As long as that sword pierced a person's body, it could burn that person's soul to ashes. That sword seemed to have been waiting for a long time ago, looking forward to the instant Su Ming's heart would tremble due to Beiling's words. At that moment, it would launch this clearly laid out assassination plan against Su Ming. Blood covered Su Ming's chest. The sword that appeared behind him penetrated his back and revealed its tip at his chest. Blood trickled down from the tip and fell on the ground, the snow covering it. It fell one drop at a time. Su Ming, you should not have come to Great Leaf Immortal Sect, an old voice stated from behind Su Ming. He was familiar with that voice. It was Beiling's father, Dark Mountain Tribe's head of the guards. Almost at the instant he plunged that sword into Su Ming's back and said those words. Su Ming lowered his head to look at the tip of the sword, and at that moment, Beiling's expression immediately turned into ferocious look before him. As he charged forward, he appeared right in front of Su Ming. He lifted his right hand, and a black knife appeared on his palm. He stabbed it into the center of Su Ming's brows. Su Ming, die! The knife sank deep into the center of Su Ming's brows. At the same time, incantations suddenly appeared in the sky. As they reverberated in the air, groups of people swiftly appeared, and they were Great Leaf Immortal Sect disciples that numbered nearly 10,000. They floated in midair, filling up an area of 1,000 lees. With Great Leaf Immortal Sect's mountain as their center, they formed an incredibly huge rune. This rune began slowly operating as these people moved about, and as it was activated, a huge sealing force descended on the land with a bang. At the same time the sealing force spread out from the rune, that group of people lifted the swords in their hands and cut downwards in Su Ming's direction. The near 10,000 swords turned into 1,000 feet sword as the rune began its operations, and booming sounds surged into the sky. That sword let out a primitive, ancient air, and swiftly charged down towards Su Ming from the sky. You are not Dark Mountain Tribe's Bei Ling. Su Ming did not bother himself with the sword coming from the sky. He looked at the ferocious Beiling, and as he said these words flatly, Beiling's expression suddenly changed drastically. His eyes went wide, and he saw the blade that had sunk into the center of Su Ming's brows rapidly freezing before it turned into ice within an instant. As that ice spread out, he moved to let go of his grip, but the ice covered his arm and spread swiftly to his entire body, freezing him and his nascent divinity into an ice statue that stood before Su Ming. Neither are you Dark Mountain Tribe's head of the guards. As Su Ming whispered softly, the tip of the sword at his chest had turned into ice. Behind him, the head of the guards let out a shocked cry and started rapidly retreating, but before he could even take 3 steps back, he froze into an ice statue, just like his son. This was the divine ability Su Ming had created when he reached Life Cultivation Realm. He was midwinter. His life matrix was winter. He could bring forth the snow of midwinter and freeze everything. Aside from those whose level of cultivation was greater than his, it was impossible for anyone to survive before him, who was now in Life Cultivation Realm. Cracking sounds reverberated in the air. The ice statue that was Beiling retained his ferocious expression as it fell to pieces. The ice statue that was his father also shattered as the cracking sounds shot into the sky. The knife at the center of Su Ming's brows shattered, and so did the tip of the sword at his chest. He still did not bother with the sword descending from the sky. Instead, he looked towards Xianxia, who had blood at the corners of her lips. "Why did you warn me?" he asked softly. Chapter 7:15. The smile he had not seen for a long time. A layer of red snow landed on Xianxia's face. It did not melt, but brought with it a hint of cold, just like Su Ming's words. There was the presence of a stranger within those gentle words as they fell into Xianxia's ears and entered her heart. There was still blood flowing down the corners of Xianxia's lips. The red shade of her blood was the same as the color of snow on her face, making it hard to differentiate what was snow and what was blood. Perhaps snow was often associated with blood because there was some form of connection between them. There is no reason. If there is, then it's because you are Su Ming. You are the Su Ming who grew up with me. Xianxia wiped away the blood at the corners of her mouth and looked at Su Ming. The complicated look on her face disappeared to be replaced by a hint of gentleness and a smile. Su Ming remained silent. When he lifted his right hand, the killing sword in his hand trembled in excitement, and Su Ming swung it towards the sky. Blood light shone as if a bolt of blood-red lightning had been born in the world out of nowhere, and it charged towards the descending sword in midair. A circular wave of impact that shook the entire area instantly rose with loud bangs above Su Ming. The descending sword fell to pieces, and the circular wave looked as if it was a boundary line that separated the sky and earth. "Thank you," Su Ming whispered softly. "Su Ming, everything in Dark Mountain is a lie, but there were also some things that were real. Lei Chen was real, the Elder was also real. Bai Ling, too. She also has a real side to her." Xianxia looked at Su Ming. She had a sense that if a person's entire past became a lie, that feeling of surreal would drown them like a tidal wave. It would make a person subconsciously suspect everything around them, and they would no longer be able to tell just what was real. "You killed Beiling, so I'm pretty certain that the prodigies from the other sects who had blended into Dark Mountain and grown up with you had also died. But Su Ming, only their divine clones died. The things that happened in Dark Mountain in the past are things that occurred a long, long time ago. When we woke up from that cycle of life, we obtained quite a lot of epiphanies and serendipities and became the true prodigies of our sects. Right now, the ones you killed in the land of berserkers are just the ones who are used to make sure you went through all those cycles of reincarnation repeatedly. They're divine clones that must exist to make you lost. Their real selves are still in their sects in the land of immortals. They aren't dead yet." Xianxia looked at Su Ming and told him the truth. "Then, what about you?" Su Ming asked faintly. "I am also a divine clone. I can sense my real self's mind." At the moment she saw you, I could sense the complicated feelings within her, as well as her yearning. Xianxia's expression was full of anguish as she shook her head. "I practiced cultivation since I was young, so the things I went through in Dark Mountain are the most vibrant memories of my life. I truly wished that I would never wake up from that cycle of life, that I could just keep on being in Dark Mountain." Xianxia's face turned pale as she mumbled in her anguish. It was as if she was not talking to Su Ming, but was talking to herself after years of suppressing her own feelings. As Xianxia mumbled under her breath, the near 10,000 Great Leaf Immortal Sect disciples in the sky changed their positions rapidly. As they crossed paths with each other, they gave others the feeling that the sword rune in the sky had changed once again, and a wave of sword aura that was even stronger than before gathered together with a bang before it charged towards Su Ming from the sky. "Su Ming, there are some among us who chose to forget you, but there are also some who still remember you. They remember Dark Mountain, and growing up together within that cycle of life. Dark Mountain has already become a thing of the past, but it is in your heart, and is also in our hearts." Xianxia lifted her right hand. At the instant she said these words, more blood flowed out of the corners of her lips. Her face swiftly withered away and cracks gradually appeared on her skin. Her words reverberated in the air. When Su Ming looked at her, he saw her rapidly disappearing. Her body was like ashes at that moment. "This divine clone of mine broke my oath, telling you too many truths in the land of berserkers. This is the punishment from the oath. My divine clone's soul will scatter into nothingness, but they can't do anything to my real self. Su Ming, don't blame Beiling. He's no longer himself." Xianxia whispered softly and closed her eyes. Her body turned into ashes and disappeared into the world. Su Ming fell silent. As a slightly complicated look appeared on his face, the sword above him came charging downwards and crashed into him, but at the instant the sword aura touched Su Ming, he had lifted his left hand and seized it. With a bang, that sword aura shattered, and with Su Ming as the center, the mountain rocks under his feet crumbled as if a storm that could destroy mountains was sweeping through it. When an even more violent bang rang into the air, the remaining half of the mountain under Su Ming's feet shattered completely. Su Ming lowered his head and looked at the sword in his hand. It was crimson red, blood covering it completely. He looked at his own clothes and hands. He could even feel an endless amount of forlorn and bitter vengeful souls around him. They were all the immortals that had died at his hands. A deep wave of fatigue washed over Su Ming's heart and soul. This was not the first time this feeling of fatigue rose in him, but this time it was deeper than before. Su Ming wanted to close his eyes, but he could not. His expression changed drastically. The fatigue in his eyes also disappeared at that moment. His breathing quickened, because, at the instant the mountain fell apart, he sensed his second senior brother's presence. Without any hesitation, Su Ming lifted his left hand, formed a seal, and swung his arm forward. A violent gust of wind charged forward and swept up all the crushed stones in the area to make them fall backwards. All the dust that had appeared due to the collapse scattered away, and the ground was revealed. This was originally where Great Leaf Immortal Sect was supposed to be. At that moment, there was a ball of light that was several dozens of feet big on the ground. The ball of light shone with 5 brilliant colors. There was a thin layer of fog by its edges, and within the ball of light was a black, distorted figure. The figure's face could not be seen clearly, because he no longer had a face. It was a black shadow tuft gathered together by wisps of black smoke. There were 6 giant chains inside and outside the ball of light. Those 6 chains pierced through the ball of light and connected with the black shadow as if they had fused into his soul and were acting like something akin to a seal. The other ends of the 6 chains were buried in the ground. There was a gigantic rune on the ground. It was an incredibly complicated one, and its use was unknown, but Su Ming could tell that one of the functions of the rune was to suppress. It was suppressing the black shadow in the ball of light, and it even needed Great Leaf Immortal Sect's entire mountain to do so. This allowed the rune to be able to make this ball of light contain all its presence hidden on normal days. When Great Leaf Immortal Sect's mountain collapsed, the ball of light was revealed. Almost at the moment anger rose in Su Ming's eyes because he saw the rune on the ground and the ball of light. He also saw the black shadow almost collapsing as it distorted. 6 wisps of black smoke with the air of death spread out from the black shadow and charged towards the rune through the chains. This was clearly not something the black shadow was doing willingly. Those chains were absorbing it forcefully. When those 6 wisps of black smoke fused into the rune on the ground, they changed into a vast amount from spiritual aura of the world in the blink of an eye and spread out. Su Ming let out a crazed roar towards the sky. As anger raged in his eyes, blood flowed out from them, making him look as if he was crying tears of blood. He should have been able to see earlier that the spiritual aura from the world in the region of Great Leaf Immortal Sect was much denser compared to the other regions, but he had not paid too much attention to it previously. He did not expect that Great Leaf Immortal Sect would do something that would drive him so mad. This was a rune that could change a form of life into the spiritual aura in the world. Those 6 chains were the tubes that absorbed that form of life, and it was the black shadow in the ball of light. That ball of light was a seal, and the black shadow inside was the source of the familiarity Su Ming sensed. It was the reason that drove him mad. Second senior brother. Su Ming's roar was hoarse from his rage and madness. Qianxia's words had originally made fatigue appear in Su Ming's heart, and he had even stopped slaughtering Great Leaf Immortal Sect's disciples. However, when he saw his second senior brother and how he was so weakened that he was going to disappear at any moment, his killing intent surged up once again. Great Leaf Immortal Sect. Immortals. Su Ming took a swift step forward and charged towards the ground. He approached the rune on the ground in the span of a breath and lifted the sword in his right hand. The world roared from his swing, and his killing sword cut down one of the chains. A huge rebound shot back and surged into Su Ming's body, tearing the web of his thumb. Blood filled his hand, and he took 3 steps backwards. Su Ming might be moving backwards, but the chain let out a cracking sound and shattered right from its center. That chain was definitely not something ordinary. If Su Ming was not holding onto the killing sword, it would be difficult for him to destroy it. Once one of the 6 chains was broken, the near 10,000 Great Leaf Immortal Sect disciples in the sky cut down again, and their slashes charged down towards Su Ming. In fact, each of the disciples bit the tip of their tongues and coughed up blood that turned into a small blood-red sword due to the sword rune. These near 10,000 small blood-red swords were like blades raining down from the sky, and they came charging towards Su Ming while blotting out the sky behind the gigantic sword aura. It was also at that moment that the chain broke off, and a weak voice came from the ball of light. The distorted black shadow looked as if the limit set on him had reduced slightly, and he slightly gathered together, the tuft of fog to gradually showing the shape of a body. It might still look like an illusion, but his face had become much clearer, and he showed a pale but smiling face. It was Su Ming's second senior brother's face. He seemed to have gone through inconceivable pain. That pale face was something that Su Ming had never seen on his second senior brother, yet the smile was still as gentle as it was in his memories. Second senior brother still kept his head held high as if he wanted to have sunlight shine on the side of his face. As he smiled, he looked at Su Ming. youngest junior brother.